The canvas stood empty on Olivia's easel, mocking her with its pristine white surface. Outside her studio window, autumn leaves danced in the late afternoon breeze, casting shifting shadows across what should have been her next masterpiece. But her mind kept drifting to the missing painting, her missing painting, the light within. She hadn't noticed its absence immediately. The wall where it had hung in their modest living room had been bare for 3 days before a nagging sense of wrongness finally registered. When she'd asked Luke about it, he'd mumbled something about redecorating and hurried off to work, leaving his coffee half-finished on the kitchen counter. That wasn't like him at all. Olivia set down her brush, unable to focus on the blank canvas before her. The missing painting wasn't just any piece, it was the one that had launched her career 5 years ago, earning critical acclaim at a small gallery showing in Portland. More importantly, it represented a pivotal moment in her relationship with Luke. She'd painted it during their first year of marriage, capturing the raw emotion of their early love in bold strokes of cerulean and gold. The critics had praised its intimate vulnerability, but they couldn't know that every brushstroke contained a private message, a secret language between husband and wife. Running her fingers through her dark hair, Olivia checked her phone again. No messages from Luke. These days, his texts were becoming increasingly sparse, filled with vague excuses about late meetings and client dinners. She tried to ignore the warning signs, the whispered phone calls, the mysterious weekends, at the office, the growing distance between them when they shared a bed. But the missing painting felt different. It felt like a betrayal of something sacred. "Maybe I'm overreacting," she murmured to herself, but the words felt hollow in the quiet studio. Their small town of Cedar Grove had always been their sanctuary, a place where they'd planned to build their future together. Now the familiar streets seemed to hold secrets, and every neighbor's sympathetic glance made her wonder what they knew that she didn't. The sound of a car door slamming jolted her from her thoughts. Through the studio window, she watched Luke hurrying up their front walk, his suit jacket clutched tight against the autumn chill. Something about his posture seemed wrong, hunched, defensive. Before he disappeared inside, she caught a glimpse of his face. The worry lines around his mouth had deepened, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Olivia's phone buzzed, startling her. It was a message from Claire, her closest friend since college. "Hey Liv, you need to see this. Call me ASAP." Attached was a screenshot that made Olivia's blood run cold. It showed an auction listing from a prestigious gallery in Seattle. There, in perfect high-resolution detail, was "The Light Within." The description praised its emotional resonance and masterful technique, estimated value, $75,000. The seller was listed as anonymous. Her hands trembling, Olivia zoomed in on the image. There was no mistake, every brushstroke was exactly as she remembered, every shade of blue holding memories of those early, hopeful days. But what struck her most was the date. The auction was scheduled for tomorrow. Downstairs, she heard Luke moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of their domestic routine continuing as if nothing had changed. The coffee maker gurgled. Cabinet doors opened and closed. A spoon clinked against ceramic. Such ordinary sounds for a moment that felt anything but ordinary. Olivia stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She had two choices: confront Luke now or wait to gather more information. Years of marriage had taught her to read his moods, to anticipate his reactions. If she confronted him without proof, he would deflect, make excuses, perhaps even make her doubt her own suspicions. No, she needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. She opened her laptop and began to search, diving deep into auction records and gallery listings. As she worked, the sun sank lower, painting the studio in shades of amber and shadow. Each new piece of information felt like another crack in the foundation of her marriage. The painting had been authenticated 2 weeks ago. The seller had provided comprehensive provenance documentation. Everything was perfectly, legally in order. Except that Olivia had never agreed to sell her painting. A soft knock at the studio door made her jump. Liv? Luke's voice was tentative, almost gentle. I made dinner. That pasta you like. She closed her laptop slowly, composing her features into a mask of normalcy. I'll be right down, she called back, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Through the door, she heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway. Olivia looked around her studio, at the half-finished canvases, the carefully organized brushes, the photographs of happier times tacked to her inspiration board. Everything in this room represented trust, creativity, and love. Now she had to wonder how much of it had been built on lies. She picked up her phone and typed a quick reply to Claire, I know. Need your help. Meet me tomorrow morning. The response came immediately, 9 a.m. The usual spot. And Liv? Don't do anything rash tonight. Olivia slipped her phone into her pocket and took a deep breath. Downstairs, her husband was waiting with dinner and excuses. She would sit across from him, share a meal, and pretend she didn't know that he had betrayed everything they'd built together. Because tomorrow, she would begin to uncover the truth, not just about the painting, but about the man she had trusted with her heart. As she descended the stairs, the scent of garlic and basil wafted up to meet her. Such a normal evening, she thought. Except that nothing would ever be normal again. Dinner passed in a fog of forced conversation and careful glances. Luke had indeed made her favorite pasta, the sauce rich with fresh tomatoes and herbs from their garden. Olivia watched him across their small dining table, studying the man she thought she knew. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine glass. When had those lines around his eyes become so deep? When had the silver at his temples begun to spread? The gallery called today, she said finally, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They're interested in a new series. Luke's fork clattered against his plate. Just for a moment, panic flashed across his face before he managed a smile. That's wonderful, Liv. Which gallery? Riverside Contemporary. In Seattle. His smile faltered. A bead of sweat appeared at his hairline. Seattle? That's great. Really great. Olivia took a deliberate sip of wine, letting the silence stretch between them. Through their kitchen window, she could see their neighbors' lights coming on as evening settled over Cedar Grove. How many quiet dinners had they shared in this room? How many dreams had they built over plates of pasta and glasses of wine? I've been thinking about my old work, she continued, watching him carefully. Especially, the light within. Remember how you used to say it captured everything about our first year together? Luke pushed back from the table abruptly. I should clean up. Early meeting tomorrow. He gathered their plates, still half full of food, and practically fled to the kitchen. Olivia followed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. She found him gripping the edge of the sink, his knuckles white. Luke, she said softly, where is my painting? The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Liv, please. Not tonight. Then when? Her voice rose despite her determination to stay calm. When were you going to tell me that you put it up for auction? He spun to face her, and the devastation in his eyes almost made her step back. How did you dash? Claire saw the listing. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to let me believe it was lost? Stolen. What was your plan, Luke? I was going to replace it, he whispered. After everything was sorted out, I was going to commission you to paint another one. A better one. The casual cruelty of his words struck her like a physical blow. Replace it? That painting wasn't just a commodity, Luke. It was us. It was every promise we made to each other. How could you think you could just replace it? You don't understand. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. The money. I needed it. Just for a little while. Once I fix things dash. What things? Olivia stepped closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. What's really going on? For a moment, she thought he might finally tell her the truth. She saw the struggle in his face, the way his lips parted around unspoken words. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and the moment shattered. He checked the message, and what little color remained drained from his face. I have to go. Now. Luke, we're in the middle of dash. I'm sorry. He was already moving past her, grabbing his keys from the counter. I'll explain everything soon. I promise. The front door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. Olivia stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of their interrupted dinner, listening to his car start and pull away. Her phone buzzed. Claire again, you okay? Want me to come over? Olivia looked around the kitchen, at the dishes in the sink, the half-empty wine glasses, the herbs Luke had carefully picked from their garden just hours ago. Every detail of their life together suddenly seemed like a prop in a play where she'd forgotten her lines. No, she typed back. But I need you to help me with something. Can you get into the auction preview tomorrow? Already handled, Claire replied. My client has a VIP pass. We can see the painting at 10 a.m., before the actual auction starts. Olivia sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly weak. Thank you. And Claire? I need one more favor. Can you look into Luke's work history? Something's wrong. He's scared. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before Claire's response came through. There are rumors. The firm's been under investigation. But Liv, that might not be the whole story. Are you sure you want to know? No, Olivia thought. She wasn't sure at all. But as she looked at the empty chair where her husband should have been, she knew she had no choice. The painting wasn't just a piece of art, it was a symbol of every truth and lie in their marriage. And tomorrow, one way or another, those lies would begin to unravel. She walked slowly through their dark house, turning off lights, straightening pictures on walls that suddenly felt bare and hostile. In their bedroom, Luke's side of the closet was a mess, clothes pulled askew, boxes disturbed. He'd been searching for something. On his nightstand, partially hidden under a book, was a crumpled envelope. Olivia's hands shook as she smoothed it open. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, torn precisely in half. On the back, written in red ink, was a date. Tomorrow's date. The piece of her heart that still wanted to trust him, to believe in their love, cracked a little further. Because now she knew, the auction wasn't just about money. It was about fear. And tomorrow, she would find out exactly what had frightened her husband enough to sell their most precious memories. The morning light filtered through the gallery windows, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor. Olivia stood before her painting, Claire's steady presence beside her, and felt the weight of every brushstroke she'd once laid down with such hope and trust. The light within looked different here, surrounded by the sterile white walls and track lighting of the auction house. What had once been intimate now felt exposed, vulnerable. The cerulean blues she'd mixed to capture the exact shade of Luke's eyes seemed to hold shadows she'd never noticed before. You don't have to do this, Claire murmured, her hand gentle on Olivia's arm. We can find another way. Olivia shook her head, unable to look away from the canvas. Tell me what you found out about the firm. Claire's silence stretched for several heartbeats. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. The SEC investigation started 6 months ago. Allegations of insider trading, money laundering. Luke's department is at the center of it. And Olivia knew her friend well enough to hear the unspoken weight behind her words. There are connections to some dangerous people. The kind who don't file lawsuits when they're unhappy. Claire hesitated. The torn playing card you found? It's a warning sign. They're known for leaving cards as messages. The Queen of Hearts specifically means dash. Time's running out, Olivia finished. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. That's why he's been so desperate. He's not just trying to save himself, is he? The threats usually extend to family members. Claire's grip on her arm tightened slightly. Liv, I think he sold the painting to protect you. The revelation settled over Olivia like a heavy blanket, smothering her anger and replacing it with a different kind of pain. She remembered Luke's trembling hands at dinner, the fear in his eyes, the way he'd been trying to keep her at arm's length. Had he been trying to shield her all along? A quiet cough interrupted her thoughts. They turned to find an elderly man watching them, his eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Anderson. I'm Harold Whitman. I believe we need to talk about your painting. Olivia straightened. You're the buyer. Current owner, he corrected gently. Your husband was quite desperate to sell, but he insisted on certain conditions. The primary one being that the painting must be returned to you if you came to claim it before the auction. Claire made a small sound of surprise. That's unusual. As was his insistence on selling it for far below market value. Mr. Whitman smiled sadly. He seemed to think speed was more important than price. When a man makes that kind of choice, it usually means he's running from something. Or trying to protect someone. The gallery's climate-controlled air suddenly felt too thin. Olivia swayed slightly, steadied by Claire's grip. Did he tell you anything else? Only that I should give you this if you came. He handed her an envelope, heavy with what felt like a key inside. He said you would know where to look. Olivia's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a safety deposit box key and a note in Luke's familiar handwriting. The truth is in box 247. I'm sorry for everything. Whatever happens, remember that loving you was the most honest thing I've ever done. She looked up to find Mr. Whitman watching her with gentle concern. The painting is yours, Mrs. Anderson. Whatever your husband is involved in, I hope you can help him find his way back. Thank you, she whispered, but he was already walking away, leaving her alone with Claire and the weight of new understanding. The nearest branch of his bank is 10 minutes from here, Claire said quietly. We should go now, before dash. The rest of her sentence was cut off by the sharp trill of Olivia's phone. Unknown number. Her hand shook as she answered. Mrs. Anderson. The voice was professional, detached. This is Detective Sarah Martinez. We need you to come to Cedar Grove Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been admitted with severe injuries. The world tilted. Olivia felt Claire's arm around her waist, supporting her. Is he dash? He's stable, but he's been asking for you. And Mrs. Anderson? We'll need to ask you some questions about a series of transfers from your joint accounts. It seems your husband has been involved in something very complicated. The phone slipped from Olivia's numb fingers. She stared up at her painting, at the swirls of gold and blue that had once represented such perfect love and trust. Now those same colors seemed to hold different meanings: desperation, sacrifice, and perhaps something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. We need to get to the hospital, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. But first, we're going to that safety deposit box. Whatever Luke was trying to protect me from, I need to understand it. All of it. Claire nodded, already gathering her things. What about the painting? Olivia looked one last time at the canvas that had started this journey. Leave it. Some things are worth more than art. Luke tried to tell me that, in his own way. Now it's my turn to show him what's really worth fighting for. As they hurried from the gallery, Olivia clutched the key like a lifeline. In her mind, she kept seeing the torn Queen of Hearts, but now it seemed less like a threat and more like a plea. Someone had tried to tear her family apart. Now she would have to find the strength to piece it back together, if there was anything left to save. The safety deposit box contained a truth far heavier than its physical contents suggested. Olivia sat in Claire's parked car outside Cedar Grove Memorial, holding the stack of documents that explained everything, and nothing at all. Bank statements, threatening letters, photographs that made her stomach turn. The story they told was one of a man drowning in circumstances he never meant to create. "We should go in," Claire said softly, but made no move to leave the car. She understood that Olivia needed these last few moments to armor herself against what waited inside. The documentation painted a clear picture. Luke had discovered financial irregularities at the firm months ago. Instead of reporting them immediately, he tried to gather evidence, to build a case that would protect the innocent employees who might be caught in the fallout. But in doing so, he'd drawn attention from people who preferred their secrets buried. "He tried to fix it himself," Olivia whispered, touching a photograph that showed Luke meeting with a man whose face had been deliberately blurred. "All this time, I thought he was pulling away because he'd stopped loving me. But he was trying to keep me safe." The hospital corridors seemed endless, each step echoing with the weight of newfound understanding. Detective Martinez met them outside Luke's room, her dark eyes sharp but not unkind. "Mrs. Anderson. Before you go in, you should know, he's been asking for forgiveness. Not for himself, but for involving you in this." Olivia's throat tightened. "Is he in danger here?" "We have officers posted. But honestly, the people he's dealing with don't need to hurt him anymore. They've already taken what they wanted." The detective's gaze flickered to the documents in Olivia's hands. "Though I suspect they didn't count on him keeping proof." The sight of Luke in the hospital bed nearly broke her. His face was mottled with bruises, one arm wrapped in a cast, but it was the defeat in his eyes that hurt the most. When he saw her, he tried to turn away, shame written in every line of his body. "Don't," Olivia said, her voice cracking. She crossed the room in 3 steps, careful as she took his uninjured hand. "Luke, look at me. Please. I never wanted." His voice was raspy, pained. "The painting. I'm so sorry about the painting. I know about the conditions you put on the sale," she said gently. "About making sure I could get it back. Just like I know about the evidence you've been gathering." She placed the documents from the safety deposit box on his bedside table. "You should have trusted me with the truth." A tear slipped down his bruised cheek. "They showed me photos of you. At your studio, at the grocery store, walking home from Claire's. They said they could reach you anytime. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, if I sold the painting and paid them off, they'd leave us alone. But they didn't stop there, did they?" Luke's hand tightened on hers. "They wanted me to falsify documents. To help them hide what they'd been doing. When I refused." He gestured weakly at his injuries. Detective Martinez cleared her throat from the doorway. "Mr. Anderson, we'll need a formal statement. But right now, I'm more interested in the contents of that safety deposit box. You've given us enough to move on some very powerful people." "It won't stop them," Luke whispered. "No," Olivia agreed, "but it gives us a fighting chance." She turned to the detective. "I want to make a statement too. About the threats, the surveillance, everything. And I want to know exactly what kind of protection you can offer us." Something like respect flickered in Martinez's eyes. "We can start now, if you're ready." "I need a minute." Olivia waited until the detective stepped out before turning back to Luke. His eyes were clearer now, focused on her face with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Liv, you don't have to dash. Do you remember what I told you when I finished that painting?" She kept her voice soft, intimate. "I said it was about the light I saw in you. Not just the good times or the easy moments, but the core of who you are. Someone who tries to protect others, even at a terrible cost." "I failed," he whispered. "No." She touched his bruised face gently. "You tried to carry this alone because you love me. Now let me show you what love really means. We fight this together. No more secrets, no more sacrifices. Whatever comes next, we face it as partners. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. I don't deserve dash. This isn't about deserving, she interrupted. It's about choosing. Every day, we choose who we want to be, who we want to fight for. I'm choosing us. The question is, are you ready to let me fight with you? Through the hospital window, the late afternoon sun painted the room in shades of gold and blue, the same colors she'd used in their painting. Luke's hand trembled in hers as he nodded slowly, finally letting go of the weight he'd carried alone for so long. Outside, she knew Detective Martinez was waiting. There would be statements to make, evidence to review, hard truths to face. The people who had hurt Luke wouldn't simply disappear. But as she held her husband's hand, Olivia felt something she hadn't expected, not just determination or anger, but a fierce, protective love that felt like its own kind of strength. The light within, she realized, wasn't just about joy or passion. Sometimes it was about the courage to stand together in darkness, to hold on when the world tried to tear you apart. She had painted that truth once. Now it was time to live it. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of hospital visits, police statements, and quiet moments of rebuilding. Olivia set up a makeshift studio in Luke's hospital room, her sketchbook capturing the changing light as autumn deepened outside the window. Each drawing became a marker of time, a way to process the complicated emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Detective Martinez proved to be an unexpected ally, her quiet competence a steadying force as they worked through the evidence Luke had gathered. Financial crimes leave paper trails, she explained one evening, spreading documents across Luke's portable table. Your husband's detailed records give us leverage. But more importantly, they give you protection. Luke watched from his bed, stronger now but still bearing the shadows of his ordeal in his eyes. They'll try to discredit me, he said softly. Make it look like I was part of the scheme. Let them try. Olivia's voice was gentle but firm as she added another sketch to the growing collection on his wall, this one showing their joined hands against the white hospital sheets. Every threat they made, every photo they took of me, it all proves they were trying to silence you. We're not hiding anymore. Claire arrived with dinner, her arms full of containers from their favorite local restaurant. The whole town's talking, she reported, setting out the food. The FBI visited the firm today. They're going through everything. Any sign of Roberts? Luke asked, naming the senior partner who had orchestrated the threats. Disappeared yesterday. But he won't get far. Claire's smile was grim. Your evidence was too thorough. The FBI found offshore accounts, shell companies, everything. Olivia watched her husband carefully. In the week since his attack, she'd learned to read the subtle signs of his anxiety, the tightening around his eyes, the way his fingers twisted in the sheets. Now, she saw something different, relief, mixed with lingering fear. Tell me, she urged softly, taking his hand. Luke was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on their intertwined fingers. I keep thinking about that morning, when I first found the discrepancies in the accounts. If I'd just reported it immediately, gone straight to the authorities. You tried to protect innocent people, Olivia reminded him. The junior staff, their families. You wanted to gather enough evidence to ensure only the guilty parties would face consequences. And in doing so, I put you at risk. His voice cracked. Every time I close my eyes, I see those photographs they showed me. You in your studio, so focused on your work, not knowing you were being watched. The thought of them hurting you. Olivia moved to sit on the edge of his bed, careful of his healing injuries. Look at me, Luke. Really look. What do you see? He studied her face, taking in the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture. I see the woman I fell in love with. The one who never backed down from a challenge. You see someone who chose to stand with you, she corrected gently. Yes, you made mistakes. You tried to carry this burden alone. But when the truth came out, when everything was exposed, what did you do? You made sure I could get the painting back. You left me the key to the evidence. Even scared and hurt, you were trying to give me the power to choose. Claire cleared her throat softly. The gallery called. Mr. Whitman wants you to know the painting is safe. He's happy to keep it in secure storage until you're ready. It's just a painting, Luke protested. No, Olivia said firmly. It's a reminder of who we are, not just as individuals, but together. Every brushstroke was about trust, about seeing the light in each other even in dark moments. Like now. Detective Martinez's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. She read the message, her expression shifting to one of contained satisfaction. They found Roberts. Airport security picked him up trying to board a private flight to the Cayman Islands. It's over. But Olivia knew it wasn't over, not really. The road ahead would be long, filled with court dates and testimony, with moments of doubt and fear. There would be nights when Luke woke from nightmares, when the weight of what they'd endured felt too heavy to bear. Yet as she looked around the hospital room, at the sketches covering the walls, at Claire's steady presence, at Martinez's quiet support, she understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to face it together, about finding strength in vulnerability and courage in connection. We should celebrate, Claire suggested, but Luke shook his head. Not yet, he said, squeezing Olivia's hand. First, I need to tell you both everything. No more secrets, no more protected silences. If we're going to move forward, you deserve the whole truth. Olivia settled more comfortably on the bed, prepared for whatever painful revelations might come. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of gold that reminded her of hope, of redemption, of light breaking through darkness. She was ready to listen, to understand, to begin the real work of rebuilding what fear and silence had nearly destroyed. 3 months later, Olivia stood in her studio, surrounded by a new series of paintings that told the story of their journey. Not through literal representation, but through the language of light and shadow, of breaking and mending, of truth emerging from darkness. The centerpiece was a large canvas she'd titled Reconstruction, a complex interplay of fractured shapes gradually cohering into something whole and luminous. Luke's recovery had been a study in patience and persistence. Physical therapy helped heal his body, but the deeper wounds, the guilt, the fear, the lingering shadows of what he'd endured, required a different kind of healing. Together, they attended counseling sessions, learning to voice the unspoken, to navigate the delicate terrain of renewed trust. You've captured it, Luke said from the doorway, his presence announced by the soft tap of his cane against the wooden floor. He moved carefully to stand beside her, his body still bearing the echoes of his injuries but growing stronger each day. The moment when everything changed. Olivia touched his hand gently, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin. Which moment? All of them. The fear, the truth, the choice to stand together. He gestured to the paintings with his free hand. But mostly the light. You always see the light, even in the darkest places. The exhibition was scheduled to open next week at Riverside Contemporary, not just The Light Within, but the entire series chronicling their journey. Mr. Whitman had insisted on hosting it, understanding intuitively that this wasn't just about art, but about transformation. Roberts took the plea deal, Luke said quietly. Martinez called this morning. His testimony will bring down the entire network. No one else will be threatened the way we were. Olivia squeezed his hand, feeling the slight tremor that still accompanied discussions of that time. You helped make that possible. Your courage, your evidence, you protected more people than you know. Our courage, he corrected softly. I wouldn't have found my way back without you. The afternoon light slanted through the studio windows, catching the fresh flowers Claire had brought that morning, a riot of colors against the white walls. Their friend had become even more of a constant presence in their lives, her steady support a reminder that family wasn't just about blood. "I've been thinking," Luke said, his voice tentative but clear. "About what you said in the hospital, about choosing who we want to be every day. I want to help others who might be in similar situations. People being pressured to stay silent, to compromise their integrity. Martinez mentioned there's a need for whistleblower support groups." Olivia turned to face him fully, seeing the spark of purpose in his eyes. This was part of healing too, finding meaning in the pain, using their experience to light the way for others. "We'll do it together," she said. "Your knowledge of the financial world, my art therapy background. We can create a safe space for people to find their voice, their strength." Luke's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears of shame and fear she'd witnessed in the hospital. These spoke of hope, of purpose rediscovered. "You still believe in me, after everything?" "I believe in us," she corrected gently. "In the truth we've learned, that real strength isn't about facing things alone, but about having the courage to be vulnerable together." She led him to the center of the studio, where the light within now hung alongside its newer companions. The painting that had started their journey had changed too, not in its physical form but in its meaning. What had once been a symbol of their early love had become something deeper, a testament to the kind of love that survives darkness, that chooses truth over comfort, that finds beauty in the process of healing. "Look," she said softly, pointing to where the golden light in the painting seemed to flow into the newer work surrounding it. "Every story has its shadows, but also its dawn. We're not just surviving, Luke. We're showing others that it's possible to rebuild, to transform pain into purpose." He wrapped his arm around her waist, and they stood together in the warm afternoon light, surrounded by art that spoke of breaking and mending, of fear and courage, of secrets revealed and trust renewed. Through the open studio window, they could hear the sounds of their small town, children laughing, birds calling, life continuing its eternal cycle of renewal. "I love you," Luke whispered, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd endured, everything they'd chosen to become. Not just the easy parts, but all of it. The strength, the struggle, the unwavering light you bring to every dark place. Olivia leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the exhibition opening, the support group planning, the ongoing work of healing. But they would face it together, their love no longer just a beautiful painting on a wall, but a living, breathing testament to the power of truth, courage, and the choice to stand in the light, even when shadows threaten to overwhelm. "We're going to be okay," she said, and for the first time in months, the words felt not like a hope or a prayer, but like a truth as solid as the canvas beneath her fingers, as real as the light streaming through the windows, painting their shared future in colors of gold and promise.